Hi, today I want to talk to you about what do you do if you have a broken trailing arm on your car, truck, or vehicle, basically car or truck. As you can see, how that broke is just really bad. Now, the back bolt's pretty easy to get out. My girlfriend has a Chevy Lumina right there. It's a 95 and her trailing arm broke. And you can see it's just really bad here. Now, everywhere I looked online, because I could not get this front bolt out for anything. In fact, you can still see the bolt seized up in there. I replaced the lug nuts on it and, on the one side. But here's the bolt. Well, part of it. And most of it's still in there. Now, everywhere I went told me, try heat, make some penetrating oil. So I did with acetone and automatic transmission fluid. And I sprayed it and let it set, and I banged on it, let it set. For like 3 days I did that and nothing. I mean, that bolt was not coming out. The bolt was still stuck in this one, and I actually beat it on the pavement to get the bolt to let loose. And I did buy new bolts for this. But what do you do instead of having to run out and buy a bunch of stuff? Blow torches that you don't really want to use, a grinder. How can you get this out without that? I did look at the price of grinders. The cheapest one in my area is probably about $35-40. And then you have to have the grinding wheel. Well, I already had some metal cutting blades. I actually don't even remember what I bought them for, but they are DeWalt. They are type 1. Now, I did try it on a drill to try to cut through that, and unfortunately that is just, no matter what I did, I could not get that to stay. And buying a bunch of nuts, bolts, and washers to try to get that on there and hope I can cut through it, it just wasn't something I wanted to do. But what I do have is I have an old skill saw. Now, what I did is I did not jack up the car. I laid on the ground, and I had the skill saw like this. Now, I'm laying on this side, and right here, I got it to where I could get this right here between the fitting, the housing that holds it, and this rubber piece. And it barely fit. I mean, just barely. But I got that skill saw going with that metal cutting blade on it, and it cut through that bolt in a matter of a couple minutes, literally. And I did it on both sides. Now, because I did this, some of the metal is kind of scuffed up when I put the new bar up, the trailing arm. But what I did was I painted the inside of it with some oil-based paint, spray paint. It's not Rust-Oleum, it's just some cheap spray paint I got at the auto parts store when I went to get some nuts and bolts. I did replace the nuts and bolts. Now, my advice is what I should have done, which I didn't do, is if you need nuts and bolts for a trailing arm, forget auto parts stores. They don't carry them. Dealerships, we called them around, and they had to order those. They're custom order. So I went to a Napa, and they have a bunch of nuts and bolts. And I took the old ones in, and they tried to match it the best they could. So my advice is, if you're going to do that, if you have a new trailing arm, take it in with you, because the back and the front are different sizes, and then they can find you a bolt that'll fit. For the Chevy Lumina, the 95, the bolts are 3.5 inches long, front and back. I couldn't tell you the size of them. I do know getting the back off, I had to use a crescent wrench and a 24 millimeter socket to get the back bolt out. And then on the front, it was a 15 and an 18, I believe, to get the front bolt to where it would even try to loosen. But unfortunately, this is seized up in there, and every time I turned it, this whole rubber piece would just turn. And I did not want to go spend a bunch of money buying a torch, brand new torch, to try to melt that out, and that's a hassle. Now this barely fit under her car. You can see the blade here and all the stuff on the saw. It only took me one blade, this one right here, that's still in the saw, to cut through that bolt, both sides. And it didn't take off a lot, but you can see the crud right here. That's from the rubber and the metal shavings. But once again, I laid on the ground, I stuck the saw up under the car facing upward, and this is a really old saw, like that. I set the trigger off, I put that to where this would move the guard, and once it started hitting that, I just went with it, and it cut right through that bolt. So if you have a trailing arm that has a stuck bolt, especially in the front, those tend to be the hardest ones to get out, because the way these are is on the front, there's a side on each side of this that goes down like this, and on the back there's only one piece. So the back's pretty easy to get out. If you have a trouble getting out the back, use a 24 millimeter on a breakover bar and stick a jack up underneath it, and you can break that off pretty easily. So anyway, if you have a trailing arm that's broke and you need to replace it, and it's giving you a headache trying to figure out how to get this thing out, the fastest and cheapest way isn't try to hook up some type of drill or get a grinder. That's it right there. And like I said, this is a DeWalt Type 1 disc, metal cutting disc. And it says 7 by 1/8 by 5/8. Anyway, that's how I did it. As you can see, her car's over there. I got it fixed. Once I got everything off and got the nuts and bolts for it, it took me 15 minutes to get the new one on, and it took me days trying to get that one off, and finally I said, you know what, I'm just going to try to cut through it. And that's what I did. It took me 5 minutes to cut through both the front and the back, and alright, I guess that's it, and everyone have a good day.